Hi, and welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast. I have a new guest here today. I've been waiting to ask her to be on the podcast for a while because we met, I think, about a year ago now at one of her LocLunch events. So welcome, Reed. It's good to see you here.
Oh, hello, Christy. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast. And I'm here because, we're here today because this podcast, it's always been my intention for it to be about language, about learning, but also about how we choose to use language. And that's one of the topics that we're going to be talking about today, specifically in relation to ageism and to avoiding ageist language, because most of the people who listen to this podcast speak multiple languages, but even if you don't, everyone makes choices every day about what language, what words they use, how we express ourselves, which expressions we avoid because we don't like them or we don't want to be associated with them, which words feel really good because they're part of our vocabulary and that they're how we speak. So we all make choices every day. And we all have an opportunity to be intentional about our use of language in our first or any other additional languages. So we'll get onto that in a bit, but let's start with who are you? Would you introduce yourself and tell us something? I'm sure a lot of people know you if they've been to your events like I have, but anyone who
Sure.
doesn't, who are you?
Oh, oh, thank you for that introduction. And yeah, let me say a few words. I do a lot. I've been in localization for quite a while, and I've been branching out. So people will see my content changing, and as I've been saying for the last year, reinventing. And it seems like reinvention is sort of like my mode and my modus operandi. Everything I do kind of revolves around that right now because the content I wrote previously as a localization advocate, of course, as everyone knows, is changing rapidly because of the age of AI and geopolitical situations. And so much is changing, job losses happening in with many of our friends and so forth. So uh, all of the things I'd done in the past with, I worked with Pearson for 15 years, helping teams understand localization and globalization. And before that, I worked for LSPs, and I was a desktop publisher in as a multilingual mode. And I handled the difficult ones. In fact, I volunteered for Japanese, and they sent me to Japanese katakana school so I could understand how that works, and um, uh, Arabic and Hebrew, bidirectional. And having my hands on, I understood the content, not being a translator, not speaking those languages, but understanding how they function. So through the years, and then working with Pearson, working with higher education course development, I've become what I call a global human advocate, but at the same time, localization advocate, and recently morphing in my calling as a coach. So I am adding in the reinvention coaching content and, of course, age inclusion, because now over the age of 60, it's very apparent to me. And I feel I have kind of like a view that's uh, extremely inclusive. And like you and I talked about a second ago, intersections of all of those areas that I've been in my life. So I like to say I dedicated myself as a liaison between cultures, languages, industries, always coming back to what's human and always coming back to what's important in global communication, emotional intelligence, and all that. So just to wrap it up as a really brief description, I write content, I explain things, I coach people, um, and I care about humanity, but also trying to help older workers and always helping them upskill with communication and whatever they need to succeed. How's that?
Good. I think people have an idea who you are, but I think that's also changing and evolving as I
Mhm.
guess as you start to launch some of your other services. There'll be more to come on that. Maybe we need to do a second podcast episode, but for
Well,
now, our focus is on the age inclusive language. And I'm just wondering
yes.
what was there something specific that happened to make you interested in this topic,
Mm.
or how did you really start reading more and finding out more about this topic?
Oh my gosh, it's been sneaking up on me. But I've always had kind of like an eye out to why are people not including older people, like hiring managers haven't been including older workers you'll see there'll be a series of, for example, an LSP puts out an ad on LinkedIn and said, hiring now. And what's the picture, the photo they put in? It's not an older person. It's always a 20-year-old image in their hiring ad. And how I got actually the very first opportunity for me to get involved, Javi Diaz Fernandez Carvajal had a panel about ageism. I can't even remember how I got included on that, but I think I was complaining on LinkedIn about why are LSPs excluding older workers? And so there was a panel and I got a chance to talk about it. And so since then, I've been on other panels and I started writing it because I see myself as a representative of the older generation than most of my colleagues. And I see a lot of misinformed opinions about older professionals and discrimination outright in hiring, which is illegal in the United States, by the way. And I like to shake things up because there's so many benefits. In fact, we can talk about that in a second, but I do have quite a bit of helpful resources to help people understand ageism and what I like to call pro-aging and age inclusion. In fact, last month or a couple of months ago was Older Americans Month, and I wrote quite a bit during that month about, you know, um, years of experience are great now, especially in the age of AI, and hiring managers should not overlook. So, but do keep in mind, ageism is a side topic, which I love talking about. But I definitely support older workers, and there's so many benefits, and I will continue to.
Yeah, so there's 2 points there just to note that one of them is that there are links and useful resources that accompany this episode. So if you want to find out more, then come to the show notes page, which is included in the information about the podcast, and that's where you'll find all the resources because this is Marina's form is the most comprehensive I've seen in terms of lots of links and information. So definitely come and check this out. But also this podcast episode is intended for everybody. So it's not only if you consider yourself to be an older worker, it's for everybody because we all communicate. We all need to think about how we communicate. So this is for everybody to think about how we approach this topic wherever we are on this scale, or, like the age scale, because we all have a
Mhm.
responsibility to be communicating in a way that is inclusive and empowering and not to use some of the terms that we're going to talk about in a minute.
Mhm.
So now if we move on to let's move on to some more concrete examples then. So we've touched on the word ageism and also
Mhm.
internalized and externalized ageism. So what are they? So for somebody that doesn't know, what are they? What's the difference and
Ooh,
how do you describe or explain what they are?
interesting. And I do mention ageism. There's like two branches. Externalized is obvious, at least to those who are older. And we can't forget to say younger, youthful ageism happens as well, because hiring managers will overlook the younger ones, the younger workers, and the older. And there seems to be this sweet spot of, I don't know what it is, 30, 25 to 30-ish, 35. And for some reason, that is the hiring sweet spot. But again, That's not to say that younger have less capability. They need to learn more, perhaps, but they're eager, they have what they bring to the table. So that's externalized. So you can see, in fact, I say, try this as an example, everyone. Go to your workplace and look around. Are they a diverse crowd? Do you have different genders, different races, different creeds and such? Okay, now look again. Do you see what age ranges? Do you see they're all the same age? Okay, then you can identify, do you have an age range issue? Then the second thing, internalized ageism. Now that is harder to identify, but we all have this. And it is so embedded into our society. And I would say many countries around the world, some worse, some better. I'm not sure what is popular in UK or in European or Asian or whatever societies right now, but I can tell you for a fact, in the US, we'll say, well, you're over the hill when you pass age 50. Or, I'm having a senior moment because I forgot something. And the thing of it is, all ages forget things, it's not just
Yeah.
because you're becoming old and decrepit. And, my mentors, Ashton Applewhite has some amazing content and videos on YouTube. In fact, she had a TED talk about the dangers or the prevalence, not even dangers, but prevalence of internalized ageism and the way we think about things. Janine Vanderberg, Changing the Narrative website, has some amazing content there about how to identify if you have internal ageism and how to deal with it. And it's okay to identify, the word old, but when you use it in reference to yourself, that's a negative connotation. In fact, there's ways that you can avoid this discrimination in your speaking, and there's language guidelines we'll talk about in a second. But that internal ageism is kind of focused on youthful images, that they're the center of everything worthwhile. And where does it come from? Well, our culture perpetrates that, selling beauty products like you need wrinkle cream because some lines show up on your face, or
Anti-aging products. It's a huge
anti-aging, and
industry, isn't it? It's
oh my goodness, and that whole gray hair thing. Oh my gosh. The minute a few gray hairs show up here in the US, we run to get that hair color to disguise that. And turns out you're just an older looking person with colored hair, you know? Um, and in fact, I went through a gray makeover recently because I was tired of always adding this silly, expensive hair color to my hair all the time. And so it's a really good way to just, let go of those things, look at the reality. One thing I put as notes for you, Kirsty, there seems to be this huge youthful cult of in Hollywood, for example. Only the younger female actors are worthwhile, and really you see photos of them and movies with them. Did you know that the male actors, they could be any age and they're still acceptable and sexy or whatever? But did you know Brad Pitt and George Clooney are both now over 60 years old?
Mhm.
And they're like the big standard of, what's hot in
The double
Hollywood.
standards that we have to deal with in so many
Uh-huh.
areas, but also this one then, this one
Isn't that
for us.
something? Yeah. Yeah. But and then I say there's this category, what I call ageless cool. So, Rolling Stones, for example, they could be 100 years old and they're still revered. But there's a few women like Chrissy Hine from Pretenders, Dolly Parton, and Stevie Nicks. They're still cool. even though they're aging. But my point is we have to work on reframing. We have to reframe our words and our thoughts. So that's my thoughts about what ageism is.
Because the words and the thoughts lead to our actions, lead to
Yes,
how we see ourselves. And I guess the biggest problem with the internalized ageism is the way that it limits the we limit ourselves if we buy into this
ex
believing things about ourselves that may not be true, or not trying things, or feeling that it's too late for things, or like if you're telling yourself a story, you don't need other people to tell you it because you're already telling yourself. And I guess that's the danger where we don't realize that we're doing it, because I mean there's a whole bigger discussion about how we speak to
yeah.
ourselves, and how we think about ourselves, but trying to keep it specifically on this topic, it can affect the decisions we make if we do that. And I think recognizing it is the first step, isn't it? Because if you don't know you're doing
Yeah.
something, you can't stop doing it because you're not aware it's a problem.
Exactly. Oh, and you know that was quite eloquent, everything you said, because that's the point. When you've internalized and you believe these things, you're not going to try for those opportunities and say that you're looking for work. You're not going to try for those positions because you've already given up because you believe that. And there's even more negative connotations in that uh, TED Talk by Ashton Applewhite. She said there are studies that show older people, the thing you're as old as you feel is actually true. But to me, it's you're as old as you let yourself believe you are. Because those who have a youthful outlook, turns out they live longer, they're productive longer. I mean, I'm not saying there's not reality to the fact that we're getting older. And as we age, at some point, things break down. That's true. It is true. But I'm saying it's not like it used to be, and we are still able to contribute. And we contribute in many ways that people don't realize. And again, we contribute more than we realize we can. Just because, there's a notion that when you're over 50, you can't do this and that with computers, technology, and such. I have to say there's a special a group that's been kind of blessed with knowledge of tech, and I belong into that category. I think of myself as multi-generational, a multi-gen, as it were, because even though my age puts me in a category that some think is no longer employable, I believe I can conquer all that because I've been using technology as an early adopter for years. So I'm very familiar with anything. I taught myself HTML, and I can work in XML, and I can do a lot of technical things. I know the ins and outs of typesetting and all of this stuff that's been technical to a degree. And I
Lifelong
think
learning, isn't it? You're not stopping. It's
exactly,
it's being open. And when we use the term like employable here, we're also talking about,
yes,
because a lot of the listeners to the podcast are self-employed, but it's also about, do you want to do something new with your business? Do you want to
yes.
launch a new service? Do you want to offer something different, or do you want to have a complete career change? Because I know people who have decided post 50 that they want to start their own business, and they didn't do that before. They had a career in something else, and they went for it and they did it. Like, there's no, whether you're talking about applying for a job or to reinventing yourself, to come back to this
Mm-hmm.
phrase,
Hello.
to
Yeah,
to do something else. It's, you're employable as in somebody that can be employed by customers to do something different or new. So it's never too late.
exactly. Exactly. And in fact, it's turning out that the hottest group, as it were, for entrepreneurs is over 50, over 60, because the attributes of a person for the most successful self-employment and entrepreneur work and solopreneurs, that's the older people, because the older generation, there's that persistence ability and attention to detail. And
Experience. I mean, I'm not in this group yet, but
experience.
I'll be there in a few years. But yeah,
Yes,
experience.
exactly. Exactly. So everything that is coveted, in what's really hot and going on in Silicon Valley, it's already, within grasp. The only thing that's missing is confidence and maybe some upskilling. And that's not difficult track. And in fact, I've written about it in my posts and I've see it and I celebrate it. It's being said now, who's the best to be working in AI for the best generative AI prompts? That's the older workers, because we're taking those years of experience. We know what to put in prompts rather than somebody that's, and I'm not saying as something against the younger, but I'm just saying choose between the two. The AI will thrive because of that experience added to those prompts. Does that make sense?
Mm, yeah, because you've got more to draw from, more experience, more lived experience to draw from to generate better ones.
Nice, nice. Yes. And the ability to spot when there's, hey, that's a hallucination, or that's just not right, and go along this line of reasoning for chain prompts. Anyway.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory, we've talked about the definitions, and we have touched on this a bit, but if we're wanting to look at more practical everyday life examples of what can we do differently? So what words can we avoid? What can we say
Mhm.
instead? Maybe you could give some practical examples to help people to see where you're going
Mm.
with this.
Mhm. So as I said, there's going to be, and as you've mentioned, there's going to be links on your show pages. I've provided, it's an actual language guidelines document, guidelines for age-inclusive communication, and this is provided by the Changing the Narrative website from Janine Vanderberg's area. And this is great because the first page just says right off the bat, what is ageism? Why should we care? It talks about stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. And in the part that actually identifies words, it's giving a side-by-side comparison and saying, avoid ageist terminology by avoiding the word senior, elderly, senior citizen, but even more the negative connotation where, that old person, or get out of the way, grandma, or those kind of things. Don't describe all older adults as frail, weak, vulnerable, and then try to find, the words that are preferred. So older adult or older people instead of senior citizen, seniors are elderly, and then use things for instead of you know young at heart. There, you look younger. What was it said to me one time? Someone said, you look younger in person. And I was thinking, do you realize what an insult that is?
How do you look on
And
video? Yeah,
he's
no,
like,
that's
does
not
that
that's not
mean I
okay.
look so? And you see when you kind of look at it, how would you feel if somebody said that to you? Uh, then you realize, oh my gosh, then they just said that I look terribly old, when I'm not in person. Anyway, so the idea is to reference age in a different way and to do reframing. Some of my favorite reframes, let's see here, I have a list. This is great. There's a lady who is on LinkedIn, Lauren Greif, and she does some excellent reframes. So instead of words that are for people who feel they are past their prime, that's a great one. Past their prime. Are you kidding me? That means past your prime means it's done. There's no better time. You are old. So use these words. Instead of past it, use the words ahead of your time. Then instead of the word has been, use the word accomplished. Here's two more. Then instead of wrinkly, you can say full of character. And then my last example, instead of out to pasture, how about enjoying life? So there's some examples for you.
Yeah, it's focusing on what's good, what's and not on, this kind of it's the end, like the end of all that's good, because it's not.
Yeah,
It's and also, how do
exactly.
people feel when you say it, whether it's intentional or not? I mean, sometimes it can be,
Yes.
sometimes it isn't, but it's still kind of reinforcing the narrative, isn't it? Which is, and that's how
Hmm.
these things stick. That's how they are able to take a hold in a society. I think, okay, as you say, some societies are more respectful of older
Hmm.
people than others, but many aren't. So everybody can do something, even if it's only small, to provide a different narrative. And I think that's what the point of this podcast is, because when I started looking at some of the resources and the information that you sent me, there's a lot that I didn't know. It
Mm.
seems obvious when you read it, but if you if you
Yeah.
don't take the time to think about it, then that's why it's good to have the conversations.
Yes. And I'm so glad, I am so glad we're having this conversation because, even those younger, in my view, younger, everybody's concerned about it. And I see people on LinkedIn more and more, oh my gosh, I'm over 30, I'm over 40, I'm over 50. And I'm saying, hey, honey, let's try over 60. And I've seen people even try to mash up with clever ideas, clever descriptions like what is it, geriatric millennial, really? Or
Mm,
what was the one, senior, young at heart senior? No, 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 no. You see what I'm saying is sort of like a little of the good, a little of the not so good, and
it's
maybe
a
it'll
bit
be
broken,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's important, because a lot of the people who, not everybody, but an increasing number of people who listen to this podcast are involved in language work in some way. And I think
Hmm.
that obviously the examples we've given here are English, because we are having a conversation in English, and this is an English
Yeah.
podcast. But if you are involved in working with other languages, whether it's because you speak them or because you're translating out of them, or be curious. What are the preferred
Hmm.
terms? Because there are languages other than English, and particularly if that's part of your job, but also just if it's part of your day-to-day life, be curious about what the better terms are in those languages.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
do you have any other advice for people specifically in the language industry?
Well, so yeah, always be curious because, and always be open because as we know, as we've seen with other so-called minorities or, not inclusive groups, when you have only one thing, you have a problem. When you have a blend of different
Mm.
groups, it's beautiful. And you see so much goodness coming together. And that's the focus of multicultural multilingualism, is it not? It is, because, if we were focusing on just one language, we wouldn't be here. We appreciate each other and we appreciate how we speak to each other. And in terms of global impact, there's a lot going on right now and in the future. One of the post I wrote was in response to this. People are realizing there's a threat to declining working age populations, especially Korea, Japan, Germany, and Italy. I don't know if you heard this, but there's a decline in population because the birth rates have stopped, basically, or slowed down. And so there's social problems going to be happening. And so in the news, you'll see an article about it. And what they're missing the point is they're saying working age is only age 20 to age 50-ish.
What?
The truth is, yeah, isn't that silly?
50?
Many people,
Really?
I know, isn't that ridiculous? But many people want to work after age 60, after age
Mm.
65. So, olders can be workers and will enhance life expectancy, and your well-being will improve, keeping working, and you have a purpose. But we can solve world global problems by, getting hiring managers to open their eyes and say, let's meet this problem of declining population by hiring older workers. So I'm just saying there's many, many different approaches to take in this topic. And those who are listening, you want to do better with the way you phrase things. Definitely take a look at the language style guide about age inclusive types of speaking, and then look at what internalized ageism is. Because I believe if you're a younger person who believes things that are negative about older people, guess what? When you get older, you're going to internalize to the point where those negative things could happen to you. So I think it's a great time to, open your mind about what it means to get older, and open your mind to how you can keep contributing to the world, society, your own well-being by allowing yourself that grace of aging with wisdom. Does that make sense?
It does, and I would encourage everyone to take a few minutes to think about that, because it's one thing listening to us, and then it's another thing to think about yourself, how you think, the language you use, and how, whether you want anything to be different about that after listening to our conversation, but also to have a look at all the resources, because I'm going to include them. And I haven't had a chance to read all of them yet, but you can do some further reading as well in your own time if this is something you want to know more about. So have a look at the resources as well.
Nice.
And I guess the best place to find out about what you're doing is LinkedIn, is that right? Or
That's right. And when you're asking about websites and stuff, right now this reinvention concept is really big for me. And so I'm going to previously released content and redoing that with, the age of AI in mind. I am launching new content with my reinvention coaching ideas and services and such. And so everything's getting a thorough, redo, update, new. So I say, keep watching LinkedIn, because that's where all of the information will be released and linked to and so forth. And yeah, if you ever ask me what's going on, I'll say it's changing every day, but it's very exciting. And I really feel like I'm coming to the point where I am blending everything I've done, everything I am doing and will do, and kind of putting it all together in a place that I think will be useful with helpful resources. And I have to mention one more thing too. I've been doing some meaningful collaborations, not only like this with you, Christy, on your show, but I'm working with others. And, Miliana, the language talent pool, we're doing language resource list, and I will expand on that in my website, and so many localization resources, because I feel that is still important to show, the people who work in localization need to know what everybody is doing. So,
and that is a really useful
lots more.
resource. I found good
Thank you.
and useful links on there as well, and I know you
Nice.
you keep updating it. And I
Yes.
I think this idea about reinvention, sometimes it can feel a bit scary and like, oh no,
Yeah.
change. How? But I
Yeah.
don't know. I think there's something empowering about it as well. Because even when I think about my situation over the last, we're talking about my podcast event, and most of the people there were people that have been that I've met in the last 2 years, when I really started to change what I'm doing. Okay, I've been working in language training since 2012, but in the last 2 years, I've really started to shift my focus a bit. So last year
Mhm.
was about, making all my information reflect what I'm doing. This year is about letting people know what I'm doing. But at the time, you're thinking,
Mhm.
oh, it's like starting again. This is scary. But at the same time, it's
Mhm.
like, well, actually, this is what I want to be doing. This is the direction I want to go in. And therefore,
Mhm.
the feelings of being scared and being excited are actually quite close, you know, and
How
it's,
interesting. Isn't it
yeah.
like that the famous Chinese character that is change, is danger, but also change, and it's sort of like the creative cauldron. And exactly, and that's what we have to do. We have to take the excitement and the benefits of change And I tell you what, I've been taking this all internally as well and putting it out in everything I do, because I moved from California to Colorado this year. And it was a huge, huge change. And, I did a gray makeover where my hair is now gray uh, in a good way. And I really celebrate and champion change. And like you said a few minutes ago that we can't stick with just one thing. We got to diversify. And I really feel that I'm able to help people on that journey and help them feel reassured and find out what is it about them that can help them survive. And that's really appreciating the many multitude of skills they have and fill in the gaps with what they need. Do you agree?
Yeah, especially now, I think when people are looking at some of the services they have been providing, particularly thinking about people who are
Mhm.
in the freelance um, people who are freelancing, people who are offering
Mhm.
language services, because I was thinking about the networking meeting I had this week, where basically
Mhm.
everybody was also talking about new things or things that they wanted to try or things that they wanted to do
Mhm.
additionally. And I know some of that is because of a need, and the need is there, and sometimes it's the needs that push us into thinking about things that we otherwise maybe didn't have time for or didn't have like brain bandwidth for.
Mhm.
But sometimes the situation may not be positive, but what the outcome can be, because it means that you're looking at new projects or new
Mhm.
services or new things that you're interested in and want to know more about. So the reinvention can be for all of us if we are
Mhm.
curious enough to find out how we want to reinvent ourselves or to look at what
Mhm.
that might look like for us.
Oh, absolutely. And people really don't need to feel reinvention would mean everything redone. It doesn't. In fact, anytime you make a change, it is a little tiny step toward reinvention. And, some of us reinvent ourselves every 10 years, or some of us reinvent ourselves every year. I tell you, if I look at my old video podcast I've done and any of the appearances I've had as a speaker, my hair changes all the time. I had a dark color, and then I had kind of a reddish tint, and then I have blonde, and like Madonna. We reinvent ourselves and strive for something different, and there's always something good to be had with that. I really feel it.
And sometimes it's just a bit closer to who we are. Like when you discover more about yourself, you're not necessarily reinventing because you want to create something new. You just want to create something that's more in line with who you are and what you want to be doing and how you want to be
Mm.
showing up.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I hope we've given everyone plenty to think about. That was my plan, and I think
Oh
we've
yeah.
succeeded. So thank you
Yes.
for coming on the podcast, for sharing your knowledge, for sharing all the links. And yeah, for everybody else who's listening, I just encourage you to reflect on what we've been talking
Yes.
about and see how it applies to you and whether there's anything that you want to do differently as a result.
Absolutely. So look to the future. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you. And yeah, I hope everyone's enjoyed this episode and we'll be back again soon.
All right. Thanks, Kirsty.